First of all, welcome to Port's Getting Started webinar. The goal of this session is mainly to get you a bit like to get familiar with Port, the main concepts of Port, and to see what the first steps of building a portal look like. My name is Matar. I'll start with a few slides. We will have about 20-25 minutes for this webinar. Hopefully, we'll have also some time for questions and to discuss some of your thoughts about what we're talking about here today. So I'm going to share my screen. During the session, feel free to write here in the Q&A section if you have any thought, and I will try to reply once in a while, and also we'll leave some time in the end for some questions. So I'm sharing my screen now for us to get started. Cool. So since we're a bit late, I'll run the slides pretty quickly. We'll first start by doing an overview of Port, understand what is an internal developer portal, why do you need it, where do you need to start thinking about it, and for which use cases it applies. Then I'll do a quick demo. I will show how the first steps of building a service catalog look like, specifically in the point of view of working on it with Port. And then in the last step, I'll try to leave some time to talk about what are the first things you need to do when you think about implementing a internal developer portal in your organization. What are the things you should focus on, and what are the main targets you need to look for? Let's get started. Quickly, I'm Matar. I'm a software engineer originally, used to be a DevOps team lead for a few years, and also used to be some sort of a teacher. I used to manage a developers course, so I used to teach engineering to young engineers. In my free time, I like to play basketball. I like to do sports and lift weights, and I also drink a lot of coffee. I'm a huge iced Americano fan, so if you need a good recipe, please feel free to let me know, and I'll send you something good. Um, and I'm now working at Port as a solution engineer, which means that I'm most of the time working with customers, hear about their use cases, and trying to help them build the best portal possible to improve developer experience and to improve productivity in their developer organization. So it's super interesting. I'll try to share some knowledge as much as possible in this short session. Let's talk about internal developer portals and how we look at it at Port and how we think you should address internal developer portals in your organization. So the first thing we look at is this sketch where we see on the right side, we have the platforms in your organization. We're talking about cloud management platforms, code management, repositories, Git, runners for CI/CD, application runtime tools like Argo, Kubernetes, virtual machines, and more. Also tools for infrastructure as code management. And each of these tools have their own learning curve. It's pretty hard to understand the terminology of each tool. You need to understand how to work with it in a best practice way. And also, since we want to, as part of the DevOps approach, we want developers to own all the different routines in their developers' workflows. They need to be familiar with this tooling today. So these tools are used by different personas in our organization. We have developers, dev managers, DevOps, CISO, and usually we have one team that owns this set of tools. It can be a DevOps team, a platform team. This team is in charge of providing this tooling to the entire organization in a good experience and also in a fast way. So these platforms won't become a blocker, but only will push us forward. Now, as time goes, you grow and you want to provide these services of the platform team in an automated way, and this is where internal developer portals come. We want to provide each of these personas a good place to go to and do their work against all of these different platforms. We're talking about each routine these personas have. Developers need to work on their features, so they go to one service catalog to look at all the information and all the context they need in order to do their work in the best way. If an on-call needs to solve an incident, we will give an on-call page in the portal to be able to manage the incident in the best way. Creating a new cloud resource can be provided in a self-service, creating a new repository, or maybe creating a ticket in Jira. Everything will be provided for me for my unique workflow in one portal. And this is the vision of Port. Port is a tool for building portals. It's not a portal you get on day one. It's a platform you use to build your own portal. And we try to give you the building blocks to do it in the best way and in the most accurate way for your DNA. These building blocks are these. We talk about four main building blocks. We have the software catalog, we have scorecards, we have self-service, and we have workflow automations. And these are all kind of tools that we give you in Port to build the best internal developer portal possible, and also to do it in the most efficient and quickest way. So this is what we're trying to provide here. The idea here is that we have the software catalog, which is a software inventory that contains all of your software components, cloud resources, microservices, Jira tickets. It should provide all the information I need, all the context I need to do my work on the platforms, and give me this visibility that I can get in anywhere else without having all of my tabs open. So this is the catalog piece. It's very common. The service catalog is one component of the software catalog that is very, very popular. Then we have self-service, which gives you the ability to provide self-service for developers, like creating a cloud resource, scaffolding a new microservice, triggering a PagerDuty incident. Basically, the idea here is to provide an easy gate to the platform team automations through a very easy-to-use UI that is very straightforward, that leaves no room for mistakes. And this is self-service actions. Then we have two more that are a bit more complex. We talk about scorecards, which are your ability to measure standards using the portal. So we have all the information in one catalog, but we want to make sure that the standards are aligned across the entire organization. Scorecards is the tool for that. We can create these kind of questions on top of the software catalog, which allows us to create these standards, and the portal will automatically evaluate whether a service is production readiness, whether a service is secured, whether we have the right documentation. So you define the questions, and the portal will automatically check whether these questions are being answered or not. And this is scorecards. And then automations talks about your way to automate stuff, to come and say, hey, whenever there's a new incident, we want to create a Slack channel with all of our on-calls to send a message summarizing the incident. The idea here is to create event-based flows. Whenever something is changed in the software catalog, we want to detect it and automatically do something behind the scenes without human intervention. And this is automations. All of these pillars are, as I said, building blocks we give you to build the portal in the best way. But since they are very enabling, we want to make sure we give you it also in a secured way. So we created a very comprehensive and easy to use RBAC layer that can be integrated with your identity provider. It can be Okta, Entra-ID, Jump Cloud, and so on. So it's really easy to manage RBAC in Port on top of the portal to control who can see which view, who can run which action, and which standards are relevant for which teams. So this is the general concept of the portal. Before moving on, if anyone has any question, I would be happy to answer it. If not, I'll get to the building and start working on Port. Cool. So we'll get to working on Port. What we're going to do today, we're going to create a portal from scratch. Once I start this onboarding process, the portal will start empty, and then we will start by integrating a few tools to Port. We do GitHub, we'll do Kubernetes, and we maybe also do PagerDuty. So a lot of data will come from my different environments. I will show you how you can get information into Port, and we will build the very first basic service catalog with that kind of process. So I will start by writing my name, just signing up to Port. Let's give a name for my team. This is Natar's Getting Started Web. And the first thing I'll do for defining my service catalog, I can invite my team, but I'm the only one here now. First thing I want to do is to bring my services. In Port, we understand that the main source of truth for what is a microservice is usually our Git repositories, whether it's a monorepo or one repo per microservice. This is usually how we map it. So I'll start by just installing the GitHub application of Port and to bring all of the microservices from my GitHub organization. So I'm going to install my GitHub app. Let me share this screen so you'll see what I'm doing. Yeah, I'm installing it on my account. I want to bring all repositories. So I see it is completed. This is why my screen stop sharing. And now we can see that the portal is being set up for the first time. And we got it. We got the first step for building our portal. We can see we have a homepage and we have some pages in the software catalog of Port. I can see here the service catalog page, which has all my repos in one place, which is supposed to be my services, and the pull request for my repo. I only have one open because I didn't work in a while on this particular organization. Out of the box, Port also created a service dashboard for me, showing me the breakdown of services by language, how many Python services we have, and also there's a room here to display an external dashboard from Datadog or Grafana. So I can come here and put here an iframe that I want to embed from one of my tools. Another thing that was created is a very basic production readiness dashboard that just checks whether a service has a README or not. So based on the data that we got from GitHub, I can check in Port which repo has a README or not. And now Port is showing me very quickly which repo has a README or not, which means that assuming this is a standard for me, I can see it in that way. Cool. I'll just have 1 second to see if we have any questions. If not, we'll move. Cool. So this brings us GitHub. Now we got microservices and pull requests in Port. Next step is to install one more integration. This one will be Kubernetes. So what I do, I go to the builder page. The builder page is like your place to manage Port as an admin. So here I can see I have two kind of resources that were created for me. One is the pull request and one is the service. Each one represents a resource in the catalog for me. I can see that Port automatically created also a schema for each one of these. So I can see I have the README, the language, the Slack, same one I saw earlier. Same goes for the schema for a pull request. I can see they are connected. Every pull request is connected to its own service. These things I got out of the box from Port once I installed the GitHub integration. Now let's do the same for Kubernetes and see what we're getting pretty quickly. I go to the plus data source button, which allows me to install more integrations of Port. And this time I'm going to install the Kubernetes agent. I'm clicking here on the Kubernetes exporter integration, and I'm choosing my name for the integration. And here I can see that in this kind of integration, instead of a SaaS app, since it's Kubernetes, I need to install it as an agent in my Kubernetes cluster. So Port is generating for me here an L command, which allows me to install the agent pretty quickly with all the details. So what I'm going to do now, I have my own Kubernetes cluster. I'm going to copy it and I'm going to paste it in my CLI. You won't see it, but I'll just run it quickly and then you'll see it updating in Port. So I got a status that, let me see if I can share it. Yeah. So I deployed this helm command and I can see it right now running. I'm moving back to Port to see what is happening and I can see that now it's done and I have Kubernetes integration installed. Let's wait a few seconds and we'll also see data coming from Kubernetes. Awesome. So we see a few pages here created for me in addition to the previous pages. I have some Kubernetes pages I have a page for clusters in the catalog. All of my Kubernetes clusters are over here. I have a page for namespaces, and I have a page for workloads. So if I click here, I can see that I actually got pretty quickly my Kubernetes workload into my portal. I can see each one of the workloads. I can see the containers JSON. I can see images, and I can see labels coming from Kubernetes. I also see the same for namespaces and for the cluster. So pretty easily, I set up a Kubernetes UI that really can help me troubleshoot Kubernetes stuff. If I click now on cluster, I can see some information about my Kubernetes cluster. I can see which namespace it has under, as well as which workloads. I can also see that in a graph view, that helps me understand very easily how my Kubernetes cluster is set up and the hierarchy in it. So it's a pretty easy troubleshooting area for me in Kubernetes. Cool. So now it means that we have a service catalog. We also installed some workloads, which is pretty cool. Now let's do something even cooler. Let's say I have a service, and this service is called 1234. 1234 is connected now to the repo. I have my README over here. I have my service overview. But now I would like to see, as part of the context of this particular service, the Kubernetes workload that are related to it. So what I can do, I can now relate it using the concept in port called relations. So as I said earlier, I can now go to the builder page, and I can decide that each service now needs to be connected to a Kubernetes workload. So what I can do here, I can create a new arrow here from workload to service. Let's call it as the type of the key. It's like a foreign key in a database. I want to call the key a service, and then I want to relate it to the service blueprint. Now, once I create the relation, I can see that they are connected, which means that port will know that there is a connection between the workload and the service, just like a database. And we now need to define how they are connected. Before moving on, I see we have a question in the audience. First question, how about monorepos for mapping my services? That's a great question. Port also knows how to map folders from one repo. As part of the GitHub integration, you can decide whether each repo is a microservice or there are a few repos that are acting as a mono repo. In that case, using the GitHub integration, we can decide to map folders instead of map repos. So we will look at the tree of the specific mono repo. It's very easy to configure. You can decide what path we need to look at in each repo. And from this path, we will take the folder and assume that each folder is a microservice. So you decide what is the mapping and how we're going to map this microservice into port. In this example, I used a very generic example of in a case where each microservice is a repo. I hope it answered the question. Feel free to also reply on the Zoom chat if you have any follow-up question. Just to show it here, I can show you in the docs how it looks like. If I go to the port docs, I can see that we can install an integration, and we have examples over here under GitHub. In this case, we have here a guide on how to install monorepos and how to map them. So you can see it here. It's under GitHub examples. You can see how you can install monorepos in port. Awesome. So now let's move back to our demo. I want to show how you can connect between a Kubernetes workload and a service. So we created this connection. And now what we can do is we can go to the software catalog to one of our workloads. Let's say that this Matar webinar workload is related to the 123 service. So I can just connect between them over here and tell port, hey, this workload is connected to this service. Once I do that, I can see that now I can see there's a service connected to my workload. I can also click on the service, and now in the context of the service, I can see the Kubernetes workload it is related to. And I can also see that in a graph view that allows me to understand it. Now, usually we wouldn't want to do it manually. We wouldn't want to connect between my workload and my repository manually by clicking in the UI. We are usually platform engineers, and we want to do it automatically based on labels, based on conventions we have. This is exactly where it gets interesting. I can go now to the data sources page and I can go to the Kubernetes integration. Once I click on it, I can see that we have a mapping, and this mapping allows me to automatically map resources from Kubernetes and to teleport how to show them in the software catalog and how to store it in the data model itself, based on the schema we have in the data model. That means that we can teleport for each namespace, for each deployment, how should we take this data and put it in the catalog. One thing we can do is we can teleport how to create a connection between a workload and a service. In most customers of Port's cases, we usually use labels. In each workload in Kubernetes, we have a label which mentions the application name. And based on that application name, Port automatically maps the relation from the workload to the service. So that means you only need to configure once and tell Port how to connect between a workload and a repository. And once you save it, it will automatically do that for all workloads, for all deployments, replica sets, and so on. And data will be automatically presented in the catalog. And we'll be able to see it in the service catalog, where you can see for each service the related workloads at one place. Cool. So this is one example of how to do it. Any other questions from the audience? Feel free to share it here if you have any. Awesome. So I don't want to overuse my time here. I just want to see how we can make it a bit more elegant and to make it a bit more clear in the UI level. So I can create a new folder in the catalog. Let's call this one Kubernetes. And put some pages into this folder to make it look better. I can also create a folder for service catalog. And we got it. So now our catalog is pretty organized. For each page, I can decide who can see it. So let's say that I want only the team leaders to look at the service dashboard. So I can come to the permission layer and say, hey, I want only Matar's user to access this page. Once I save it, only I will have access to this particular page. Next steps, I will probably, if I was building my portal now from this portal, I would install more integrations. So maybe cloud providers, maybe incident management tools like PagerDuty, Jira, bring all the development information as much as possible to port, and then organizing this data. Afterwards, I would probably create a self-service section to provide automations for my teams through port. This will give me a very cool MVP to start testing with my teams. And based on the feedback I get, I can continue installing more integrations and building more self-service actions. Now let's talk about what is our approach regarding getting started with building port. So usually, we really recommend to begin with this kind of triangle. It's a mix of three. We're talking about high demand, high value, and easy to implement. We want something, when we talk about a portal, we can really build tons of use cases. We can talk about how we manage incidents, how we release a feature, how we track productivity metrics. So it can really go to different directions when we talk about an internal developer portal. But to understand what is the best use case for your team, we would really want to start from the low-hanging fruits. The fruits that are like out there, you see the bottleneck, you see the pain. It's pretty easy to implement it, but it will also bring enough value so that people will be convinced that this tool is giving you a real return of investment, a real impact at the first steps. So this is our recommendation with how to get started with building a portal, a mix of high demand, high value, and easy to implement. This is summarizing our short webinar over here of how to get started with Port. We have also a lot of guides and examples in our docs explaining how to get started with building a portal. For each one of these workflows and use cases I just talked about, you can see a guide over here explaining to you how to do it step by step from the UI to the backend, and everything is explained pretty well over here. I also recommend joining our Slack community, and we can share afterwards the link to it. If you have any other questions, I'm there. I would be happy to hear about how it went, and if you have any other follow-up questions you want to discuss privately. Uh, Thank you so much for listening. We'll close this webinar now, and hope to see you soon. Thank you.